This is Paul Fromm with the Canada First Immigration Reform Committee. Despite initial efforts by the press and the politicians and even the police to suppress this information, it's now come out that there were wholesale attacks in cities across Germany on New Year's against white people, particularly against white women. Germans gathered in public squares to celebrate the New Year, pretty much the way in Toronto people gathered at City Hall Square, or in New York they gather at Times Square. Usually, at least in Germany, these are peaceful, enjoyable, festive experiences. It turns out there was a horror story in places like Cologne on New Year's. Mobs of, at first they wouldn't tell who these people were, but they turned out to be third world, mostly Muslim or North African immigrants, swarmed people. They would surround a woman, or even couples, and they would have to run a gauntlet of these people, who would grab at them, touch them sexually. In some cases, women had various orifices penetrated, and in the terror and confusion, very often they were robbed of their purse or wallet and their cell phone. In several cases, they were raped. There were over 500 criminal complaints launched in Cologne alone. There were at least 100 in Hamburg. There were attacks in places like Salzburg in Austria and Vienna in Austria. Some people began to think that this was part of a plan. It may well have been. And I have to thank Dr. James Sanchez in Seattle for this bit of information. He's an expert on the Arab world. He said this was something called Taharoosh, and that's Taharoosh. Taharoosh translates from Arabic roughly as collective harassment, and it has become almost a fad. For instance, there was a CBS reporter, Lara Logan, who was attacked and raped in Tahrir Square back in 2001 when she was covering the uprising against the then President Mubarak. She was swarmed by a group of Arab men who pawed her, touched her, molested her, and raped her. That is what is going on in Europe. Now, the initial reaction, as I said, of the political forces and the media was to downplay it, suppress it. At first, they wouldn't even say who the suspects were. Why? Because they're covering up the mess they've made. They brought in people who are incompatible. They come from cultures that are incompatible. They don't fit. And some of the statements being made by European spokesmen are absolutely terrifying. For instance, after almost a year of suppression, it turns out that the public was not told about sexual assaults at a concert in Stockholm last summer. And the reason was, we're told, is because the Swedish police said that they'd not mentioned the attacks until they finally got into the papers, nor had they mentioned that such attacks had occurred the year before, because the authorities were trying to avoid an anti-immigrant backlash. Isn't that interesting? Far better to put your own girls at risk, as happened in Sweden, where Afghan immigrants were molesting and rubbing themselves against these teenage girls ages 12 to 17. Far better to put their own children at risk than to call attention to the fact that this immigration invasion is not working. Well, it's working if the purpose is to replace the European founding settler people. I find that line of reasoning, and this was from a Swedish newspaper, that had not been reported initially because they didn't want to create an anti-immigration backlash. In other words, they didn't want the political establishment to be called to account for what they'd done. After it became known, thanks to the social media, thank heavens for Facebook, Twitter, and the internet, what had happened on New Year's Day in Germany, a spokesman for Angela Merkel, she's the German chancellor, she's the one responsible for this most recent invasion of over 1 million non-Germans, a million third worlders to Germany. This is what Stefan Siebert said. There were a couple of isolated incidents where angry Germans attacked some of these people from the third world. He said, there's no excuse for revenge attacks against immigrants. What there is no excuse for is bringing people to Germany in the first place who are going to replace Germans, who don't fit in. This is what there's no excuse for. There's a writer for the Globe and Mail, a columnist named Margaret Wente. And Margaret Wente is generally a pretty sensible writer, and she wrote an extensive column on the 12th of January entitled Germany's Brutal Awakening, and she makes some very good points. What has happened as this immigration invasion is beginning to show itself for what it really is? These are not the poor, the helpless, and so on. By and large, the people coming into Germany are fairly robust young men, all of them chattering on their cell phones. Oh, wait a sec. Maybe they ought to be back wherever they came from, earning a living or fighting to liberate their countries or whatever, rather than coming for the freebies in Germany. They bring a different mindset. You know, that multiculturalism is mental poison. It says all cultures are equal. No way. They're not. I don't say that. Immigrants say that. Why would you come halfway across the world to a very, very different country, cold climate and all that, unless you thought you could benefit yourself? Well, then why can't you do that in your own country? Because you're coming from a failed state. A failed state because of a failed culture. Why would, for 1 millisecond, would we allow them to bring that culture that failed there over here? Well, that's what the mental arsenic of multiculturalism says. All cultures are equal, and you have the right to maintain your culture and to practice it here, and so on. Absolute nonsense. You know, sometimes people have a rather hazy view of what multiculturalism means. Culture is far more than what you eat. You know, if it were only a matter of, well, some people like rice and some people like potatoes and some people like pasta for their starch, it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. Culture is a whole bag of things. It's attitudes, it's language, it's values. Well, some of the values that are coming out of the Middle East, they're not our values. They're not European values. For instance, the way women are repeatedly raped and molested in Germany, in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark. This is a result of an attitude. It's part of their culture, which, of course, under multiculturalism, they're urged to keep. In Margaret Wente's article, she quoted an Eritrean immigrant, and he said, well, men have weaknesses, and when they see someone smiling, it's difficult to control. See, they see different signals. In many Middle Eastern cultures, if a woman isn't bagged, that is wearing a burqa or a niqab or a hijab, why, she's considered available, or a whore. Now, we don't have that view. If a woman smiles at us, that doesn't mean she's given us a green light to have sex with her on the pavement. That's not what it means. but they bring their attitude, they bring their values, and under multiculturalism, hey, they're told that your values are as good as ours. In fact, we'll make way for yours. In fact, and indeed, that's what the lame-brained mayor of Cologne was trying to say. Well, maybe the women should maybe not go out so much, or maybe they should only go out in groups, or it's not the women's fault. Why should they be denied the right to enjoy their country because their rotten government, rotten people like the mayor of Cologne welcome these invaders in? And once again, in this article, there was the excuse that the news had been somewhat suppressed because they were afraid of how does they put it here? Oh yes, the news had been suppressed because we think it might play into the hands of the right-wing parties. So people are kept ignorant for fear that when they do know what has happened, they will see how empty and discredited and profoundly sick that their political leadership is. The fear of helping nationalists outweighs the protection and justice for their own women. That's how sick the politically correct leadership of much of Europe is, and that's why there is a wholesale revolt going on, and it's going to get stronger. Well, this is Paul Fromm with the Canadian Immigration Reform Committee. We publish a monthly newsletter, the Canadian Immigration Hotline. Check us out, write for a sample copy. This is Paul Fromm for Immigration Reform.